Hokage I'll become stronger when I'm fishing. Chapter 241-260. Chapter 241. The world changes color, everyone is watching. However, even though his body was wounded, the bloody white beard showed no sign of falling. The whole person is like a blood-soaked demon, not only has the momentum not weakened, but is constantly rising. That's what it looks like, Whitebeard. A blow with Whitebeard. Looking at Whitebeard's figure that was always full of calm and domineering, Yagami Kangta's eyes flickered slightly. Where Whitebeard suffered countless fatal injuries and still almost killed Blackbeard was very impressive to Yagami Soto. But Yagami Kanto is not afraid of this. He simply praised the will and strength of Whitebeard's opponent. 4. Yagami Kangdu, if you have a strong will, then I will be stronger than you. Your strength is strong, and I am stronger than you. I Yagami Kangdu, but I want to step on the world. Boom. Yagami Kangdu continues to fight with Whitebeard. Although Whitebeard fought bloody battles, it was all just a force of will. His aging body can no longer support such an ultra-high-intensity protracted battle. Dad. Iori, that bastard. The pirates under the Whitebeards are burning with anxiety, but they can only watch helplessly, and it is almost impossible to intervene. Sky was white with fish belly. 2 days and 2 nights passed, and the time came to the morning of the 3rd day. The final blow. Looked at him coldly. The strong white beard, even if he hadn't collapsed, his aura was already very unstable. Even when fighting, if you want to call the armed color domineering block in time, you can't do it. Yagami Kangdu looked at Whitebeard calmly. Instead of attacking him, he recovered and stored up his strength, intending to decide the outcome with one blow. Continue to drag Whitebeard down. No one knows that Whitebeard's unconventional state can how long will it stand still. In this case, one-shot decision is undoubtedly the most correct choice. Whitebeard's chest heaved, panting. He was aware of Yagami Kangdu's plan, and he also knew that Yagami Kangdu was accumulating power and planned to strike the final blow. But in the face of Yagami Kangdu's plan, he couldn't. It is impossible to rush up to stop it, but Yagami Kanto can easily let it go. Are you going to stop here? Whitebeard's eyes narrowed slightly, looking towards the back of Yagami Kangdu, or the sky above, towards the endless sky. Out of the corner of his eyes, he saw Marco and the others who were fighting hard. I saw that they were desperately trying to rush over to support them, but they were completely blocked by Fujitora and others, and they couldn't rush forward at all. Was a trace of sweat on Whitebeard's forehead, and he could feel that his body was empty and had no strength. It's like dry and dead wood. No matter how you squeeze it, it seems that it is difficult to squeeze out any vitality. Whitebeard's gaze fell on Yagami Kanto. What kind of eyes can't be described in words, full of domineering, calm, ferocious, disobedient. It's not disobedience to Yagami Kangdu, but the struggle of aging, time, this world and this sea. No, Even if it will eventually fall, it is definitely not here. Whitebeard withdrew his peripheral vision to look at Marco and others, and at this moment, it seemed that all beliefs were gathered together. That withered body, strength emerged from nowhere. This power is surging, and it will smash everything. Goo! The muscles on Whitebeard's arms are tensed, and the arms are tightly gripping the hilt of the naginata, and the power surges wildly. Opposite him, the power in Yagami Kangdu's body is also surging like a tide, and finally converges into an overflowing pond. Up! A sharp look flashed across his eyes. Whitebeard seems to have gained power again by will, but it doesn't matter. At this moment, he still has physical strength, and his body is not injured, and he has an advantage in every aspect. Even if Whitebeard has squeezed out his power again, so what? If even Whitebeard can't win, how can he step on this world and overturn the world government that has ruled the world for 800 years? Whoosh! The figure of Yagami Kangdu flashes then, he rushed towards Whitebeard. He clenched his hands, and the terrifying Susanoo formed in a short time. Complete body Susanoo, coupled with the majestic form of the 8-door Dunjia formation, exploded in full. At the same time, the white beard who held the naginata in his arms tightly flashed an unprecedented determination in his eyes. Without any roar, he just slashed the naginata down, wrapped in a shocking halo that seemed to shatter mountains. This moment. World seems to have lost its color. The world seems to have dimmed, and all the brilliance is gathered on Yagami Soto's 10-fist sword and Whitebeard's naginata. Fujitora stopped moving. Marco stopped moving. Shiryu of the Rain stopped moving. On the battlefield, at this moment, everyone almost invariably stopped their movements, looking at the battlefield that seemed to have turned into the center of the entire world. Time seemed to slow down countless times. In the gathering of countless eyes, the naginata and the 10-fist sword finally collided. Philo reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, recommend and share. Chapter 242, The Curtain Ends. The Oriole is behind. Almost in an instant, on the sky covered with dark clouds, there were signs of shredding, as if the sky was torn apart. This blow was a blow from Yagami Kangdu and Whitebeard with all their strength, condensing the ultimate armed color. Domineering, even bursting with domineering, tearing the sky and the earth. Crack! It sounded like a broken mirror. Where Yagami Soto's blade collided with Whitebeard's naginata, a clear shatter-like trace appeared. In the wanton explosion of power, Yashin Kang doubling the corners of his mouth, a smile appeared unexpectedly. Been a long time, that is. The Otsutsugi family has not given him such a feeling of fighting. Expected of the man who is known as the strongest in the world, the One Piece world, this is a worthwhile trip. Whitebeard's arm trembled violently, and he was under enormous pressure, pressing down firmly. Boom! Junjun Fruit and Complete Body Susanoo, the two forces are in a frantic conflict, both trying to destroy the other. Seemed like a few seconds had passed, and it seemed like a long time had passed. Of constant fierce conflict finally showed a change. Of Yagami Kangdu as squeezing the shocking power of Whitebeard little by little. Ultimately, Yagami Kangdu's sword swung fiercely. Chang! A sound of gold and iron resounded throughout the battlefield. Whitebeard's naginata was swung abruptly by Yagami Soto's blade and could no longer be pressed down. Of the Junjun Fruit was also completely broken by Yashin Kangdu at this moment. It's over. Yagami Kangdu took a deep breath, and at the same time he whipped his legs out, Shishyung. Whitebeard's shocking power was completely smashed by Yagami Kangdu, the naginata went up, and the shelf was completely blasted away, unable to do anything to resist. Boom! Yagami Kanto's fist fell on Whitebeard's chest. Whitebeard's chest was sunken in an instant, and the huge body instantly bent down, like a meteor, and flew backwards, blood spurting out of his mouth. Dad! Marco and the others almost all shouted in horror and panic. Whitebeard's body flew upside down in the air, across the entire battlefield. Flying over a distance of nearly 1,000 meters, it came to the edge of the island, and finally fell to the ground. At the same time, the naginata in Whitebeard's hand couldn't hold it any longer, it spun around, and finally fell to the side. In the continuous clanging sound, the giant inserted into the ground, trembled continuously, and made a sonorous metal symphony. 18 years of the era of the great pirates. The Yagami pirates and the Whitebeard pirates clashed in the Atoll waters. It was later known as the Battle of Atoll. In this battle, one of the 3 legendary pirates, the great pirate who ruled an era, Edward Newgate the Whitebeard, was defeated. The title of the strongest man in the world changed hands from this day. No longer of Whitebeard, but to a new legend. 4 emperors. Yagami Kangdu. Not far from the battle between Yagami Kangdu and Whitebeard, 10 naval warships are long overdue. Of the deck of one of the warships, the green pheasant wearing the Navy Justice cloak is looking at the direction of the island from a distance. As that, Whitebeard and Iori. It's really scary. Kizaru murmured in a wretched tone. This was not his joking words, but he felt terrible from the bottom of his heart. The power of the collision just now, even if it was so far away, he could feel his heart palpitate. If he was at the center of that attack, people will die. It looks like it's over. Whitebeard's breath has faded, and the Yagami has won. Aokiji let out a cold breath and murmured. He couldn't help but think of the scenes of his encounter with Yagami Kangdu. The two generals plus Chado, Tautu and other general candidates were not able to keep Yagami Kangdu. He even tried to intercept it with all his strength, but was easily escaped by others. It's time for us to show up. After taking a deep breath, Kazuna said in a vulgar tone. Yagami Kangdu defeated Whitebeard, and the remaining power must be very little. The Eight Gods Pirates and the Whitebeard Pirates have been fighting for so long, I am afraid they have all reached their limit. Now, even if you can't catch them all at once, you can still hit the two big four Emperor Pirates, and even make one of the four Emperor Pirates disappear. Ah, it's time for us to do it. Aokiji came back to his senses, looked in the direction of the island and spoke in a deep voice. At this time, the warship was already approaching the island. When the island came into the shelling range, a lieutenant general waved his hand. Bombardment. Destroy the Yagami Pirates, the Whitebeard Pirates. Under the command of the lieutenant general, the numerous gun muzzles on the 10 warships, which had already been prepared, fired a salvo, and bombarded the chaotic island. The shells fired by the heavy artillery exploded on the island. As the waves splashed, gunpowder smoke spread everywhere. Although the Whitebeard Pirates and the Yagami Pirates are extremely terrifying, all navies know it. Between Whitebeard and the Eight Gods has been going on for almost 3 days and 3 nights. They also have 2 generals Aokiji and Kizaru leading the team, and there are 2 outstanding generals, Tautu and Chado, here. Execute all pirates on the spot. A vice admiral drew his sword, his voice sharp and cold. Yes. In the roar of artillery, countless navies responded. Pulled out the standard long sword, set foot on the island, and rushed to the battlefield with great momentum. From now on, the battlefield is taken over by their navy. To see the underlined version of the novel, please download the Feilu novel. Chapter 243, Lao Su, but Whitebeard. Dad. Marco transformed into a phoenix form and flew in the direction of Whitebeard. This time Fujitora didn't stop him, or in other words, Marco, who was in a state of madness, rushed out from under Fujitora's suppression. Cough, cough. Whitebeard clutched his chest and coughed violently. As he coughed, countless blood droplets fell on the ground, a shocking sight. Marco rushed to Whitebeard's side and shot a ball of undead flames into Whitebeard's chest, preventing Whitebeard's injury from worsening. His undead flames cannot have much effect on anyone other than himself. It is impossible to fully recover Whitebeard's injuries in a short period of time, at most preventing the deterioration. ... Whitebeard stood up slightly with difficulty. After Marco gave Whitebeard emergency treatment, he asked Whitebeard a little anxiously, "Dad, how are you?" Whitebeard waved at Marco. Just when he was about to say something, countless shells suddenly bombarded from a distance and smashed on the island. Damn it, it's the Navy. Marco looked back and saw that a large number of naval fleets arrived on the island at some unknown time, and he couldn't help showing a bit of gritted teeth. Whitebeard lost to Yagami Soto, was seriously injured, and they were all in poor condition. After such a long battle, his stamina has been exhausted to the bottom. At this time, the Navy has appeared again, it is simply. God damn it. But the Navy's attack target is not only them, the Yagami Pirates is probably the target that the Navy wants to kill. The next situation will become very bad. Whitebeard also looked sideways in the direction of the Navy warship, and there was a hint of coldness in his eyes. Lost to Yagami Kangdu, although it was because his body was aging and he didn't have the combat power of his youth. But this battle can be considered to be dignified and undisturbed. And now, the Navy wanted to take advantage of this time to be a Oriole, which angered Whitebeard. At this moment, several shells fell from the sky, in the direction of the fall. Marco's eyes flashed, and when he was about to rush to stop him, Whitebeard suddenly waved his arm. Kacha, the power that came out of nowhere, shattered the air in an instant, making those Shells all freeze in the air, and then exploded one by one. Do you want to take Lao Su's head at this time? Navy, I'm afraid you have made a mistake, but Lao Su is a Whitebeard. Whitebeard turned around, imposing manner. With an angry shout, a punch slammed forward, and the power of shock erupted violently. Crack! The air showed traces of ice cracking. The air in front of Whitebeard shattered in a large area, and bombarded the naval warship. The terrifying shock fruit ability erupted again, shattering the front half of a warship. They've already been beaten like this, and they still have such strength. It's really scary, Whitebeard. Whoosh! A golden light flickered, and the yellow monkey appeared on the island. A terrible tone in his mouth, but there was no fear on his face. If it was the Whitebeard in his youth, it would be fine, but now an old Whitebeard, and he is seriously injured. As an admiral of the Navy, there is no reason for him to be afraid. As the voice fell, he stretched out his fingers. In the dazzling light condensed, several lasers flew out of the air, and shot towards Whitebeard. Yellow ape. Marco's eyes showed anger, and the whole person moved forward instantly, came to the front of Whitebeard, and blocked Kayabu's laser. As the Kiwi landed on the island, the Navy also rushed to the island in a large area. It's time to come. Yagami Kanto looked at the Navy fleet from a distance, a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes. And at this moment, a sakura-colored sword light swept across. The waves were slashed away by him, and the sword energy was aimed at Kangdu, the 8 gods, and fell on the head. 8 gods. Kangdu snorted coldly, and spread out his hands to grab it in the air. A wave of waves, the impact of the Sakura sword chi was annihilated in such a strange way. Far away, Admiral Momoto appeared, wearing a navy cloak and standing with a sword crossed. It has completely reached the top swordsman. No, is it the level of the so-called great swordsman? Yagami Kangdu glanced at Tautu and spoke indifferently. He is good at swordsmanship. Few dabbling, but not deep understanding. In terms of swordsmanship alone, he is now at the level of an ordinary swordsman, and he still cannot reach the level of a top swordsman. However, that's it. The first half of Yagami Kangdu's sentence was a statement and a serious tone, but the second half of the sentence suddenly changed, revealing a plain and condescending overlook. Today's Tautu is almost the same as Aokiji and others, and even stronger than Aokiji in terms of attack. But in front of today's Yagami Kangdu, it's still not enough to see. Even if Yagami Kangdu had just finished the battle with Whitebeard, Tautu wouldn't be able to win. Phailu reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, recommend and share. Chapter 244, Three-Way Melee, Swelled Navy. It's enough to deal with you. Tautu's eyes remained unchanged, and the whole person seemed to be one with the blade. In her eyes, there are only things that need to be cut and things that don't need to be cut. Master Yagami Kangdu, in our state, I'm afraid we can't fight against the Navy. Rhodes stood not far away and spoke helplessly at Yagami Kangdu. He had several wounds on his body and looked slightly embarrassed. It's impossible to survive the battle with the Whitebeard pirates for so long. Just a few injuries, mainly because the physical loss is too great. No. Hyerding took a deep breath, but his eyes were very calm, and said, and them. This they, of course, were referring to the Whitebeard pirates. What do you think? Rode looked at Yagami Kanto and asked. However, the Navy would not watch them discuss, and rushed to the Navy on the island. After attacking the Whitebeard pirates, they also brazenly attacked Shiryu of the Rain and others. Aokiji's record of the Ice Age spread across the battlefield in an instant, freezing countless people into ice sculptures. Whoosh! Except for Shiryu of Rain, everyone else jumped into the air, avoiding the large-scale attack of Aokiji's move. 11. The figure of the green pheasant flashed into the air, and his eyes calmly waved his arms. His arms instantly turned into surging ice cubes, blasting towards Yagami Kangdu. Yagami Kangdu stood on the ice, raising his hand with a cold look and punching. Boom! The shock wave erupted, instantly shattering the surging ice. That spread out was so powerful that it even bombarded Aokiji's entire body into a mass of smashed ice. Ah la la! Aokiji's body turned into ice and shattered, falling to the island below. Shiryu of Rain stood on the ice, half of his body turned into a fiery flame. With a cold gaze, he looked at the direction of Aokiji by the 8 gods, raised the sword in his hand, and slashed towards Aokiji with a sword energy wrapped in scorching fireworks. Wherever the sword energy went, the air took on a scorching hot form, as if it was about to break through the void. Kacha, kacha! The crushed ice quickly regained its shape in the air, and Aokiji waved his arms. He blocked Shiryu of the Rain's sword chi, and ignored the heat contained in Shiryu of the Rain's sword chi. His body is ice, and the hot fruit has not been developed to the limit, so it is naturally difficult to produce any effect on him. The hot fruit is very immune to the power of the latter, while the latter is almost completely immune to the power of the former. However, Shiryu the Rain's strongest technique is swordsmanship. Even if the hot fruit does not work against the green pheasant, but he can also rely on the hot fruit to have a very large resistance to ice, but it is an advantage for the green pheasant. But all of this must be established on the basis of the equivalent status of the two sides. The current Shiryu of the Rain has been fighting for a long time and has little stamina left, so it is impossible to be the opponent of Aokiji who is in a state of complete victory. Arc Moon. At the same time that Aokiji attacked Iori Kangdu, Taotu rushed forward and slashed again at Iori Kangdu from a distance. However, before this sword energy rushed to the front of Yagami Kanto, it was stopped by Fujitora's stick sword. Gravity crushed the sword energy, cutting the island into an abyss. Taotu looked at Fujitora solemnly. 8-God Kangdu retracted his fist, looked at Taotu and Qingzi, and said, "If you want to destroy 2-4 emperors at the same time, your world government's appetite is really not small." Whoosh! The moment the voice fell, Yagami Kanto took a step forward. The whole person suddenly came to the front of the green pheasant, and punched the green pheasant. Aokiji's complexion changed, his arms folded in front of him to parry. Boom! Yagami Kangdu's punch instantly shattered his armament, smashing his body into ice cubes, and splashing into the distance. As Yagami Kangdu made his move, Shiryu Yuji and the others also showed a cold look on their faces, and they brazenly shot at the rushing navy. After they fought with the Whitebeard pirates for a long time, they suddenly intervened, and everyone was a little angry. Even if the Whitebeard pirates are released, they will never make these navies feel better. Kill. Don't be afraid, they don't have much power anymore. 3 or 4, a lieutenant admiral of the naval headquarters rushed up with a large number of naval elites, his eyes were all stern. The two sides rushed together in an instant, and the situation was completely chaotic. The navy's Aokiji and Taotu, 3 solid admirals in combat. In addition, there is also an equally troublesome alternate general, Chado, who is extremely knowledgeable and can predict the future. Coupled with a large number of lieutenant admirals and naval elites, after the Iori pirates and the Whitebeard pirates went shopping, they are undoubtedly the strongest party on the field. But this is the strongest, and the strongest is limited. If they are assembled to deal with either the Yagami Kangdu or the Whitebeard, they will have the absolute upper hand, defeating and even killing them. But to deal with the Yagami pirates and the Whitebeard pirates at the same time, it is completely inflated. Chapter 245, Red-Haired Shanks, join us. Even if Yagami Kangdu consumes a lot of physical strength, and many people are injured, they are not people who can be easily defeated. If the 8 Gods pirates and the Whitebeard pirates are completely united, even if the navy has the 4 top combat powers, it is not an opponent. However, the problem is that the Yagami pirates and the Whitebeard pirates can't unite together. They are also in fierce conflict with each other, like a 3-way melee situation. And on this battlefield, the most eye-catching existence is undoubtedly the Yagami Kangdu who defeated Whitebeard and won the title of the strongest in the world. Boom, 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 the violent roar kept coming. The Yagami Kangdu, who is recklessly bursting into power, is simply A war machine. Wherever he goes, no one can resist. Even Aokiji and Peach Rabbit can only be contained from the side. Chang. The 8 Gods Kangdo's 8-door Dunjia formation is fully open, plus the full-body Susanoo's prestige mode. Every move and every style is full of power. He smashed his fists at Momotu, collided with Momotu's blade, and sparks flew everywhere. After a few punches shattered Tautu's blade, Yagami Kangdo seized the opening and pressed his hand to Tautu's chest, and the shock wave blasted out. Whoosh! Peach Rabbit resolutely retreats, and the armed color is domineering and condensed. Taking advantage of the situation to retreat and defending with a domineering look, she felt a tightness in her chest. Although he felt uncomfortable for a while, he finally resisted. Yagami Kangdo stepped forward, bullied Momotu's side, and reached out to grab her blade. Tautu is a swordsman. As long as she takes the sword away from her, her power will drop by half in an instant, and then there is the possibility of being captured alive. However, just as Yagami Kangdo rushed towards Tautu, a bullet cut through the battlefield and shot right at Yagami Kangdo's temple, forcing Yagami Aoto to give up the action of grabbing Momotu's sword and flick the bullet. Hey, don't be careless, it's just your swordsmanship. Improved, but this guy is still tough. T-Dolphin shouted not far away. When Tautu faced Yagami Kanto, she knew that she was in danger. He was a little relieved after being rescued by the T-Dolphin, but when he heard a little Peach Rabbit popping out of the T-Dolphin's mouth, he was instantly annoyed. I want you to take care of it. She replied angrily, holding the blade and fighting at Yagami Kangdo, hacking, trying to vent her anger on Yagami Kangdo. Yagami Kangdo vaguely knew the reason why the T-Dolphin failed to pursue Tautu 100 times. Boom! Yagami Kangdo parried 2 moves and smashed Tautu's blade with 1 punch. After a 2-second stalemate between the 2 sides, Tautu was unable to fight against Yagami Kanto head-on. Flew towards the rear and landed dozens of meters away. Looking at the Peach Rabbit that flew out backwards, Yagami Kangdo's eyes flashed. Was about to take a step forward and continue to attack, a voice suddenly sounded on the chaotic battlefield. Stop! The sound was not loud, but it spread throughout the battlefield. It seemed to contain some kind of inexplicable power, causing many people to subconsciously stop the movements in their hands. He raised his head and looked in the direction from which the voice came from. There! A figure wrapped in a black cloak stepped onto the island at an unknown time. Standing on the edge of the island, his eyes swept across the entire battlefield. He had red hair and was not tall. Like Yagami Kangdo, he has the body shape of an ordinary person, but he has a vaguely terrifying aura, condensing in that body, which makes people palpitate. It's him. Why is he here? The moment they saw that figure, everyone's expressions changed. A glimmer of light flashed in Whitebeard's eyes. Aokiji Kyabu and the others' expressions changed slightly, and Yagami Kangdo narrowed his eyes slightly. Red-haired Shanks. Someone called out the identity of the figure. The third of the 4 emperors, the red-haired Shanks, finally arrived on the battlefield. On the battlefield, the Navy, the Whitebeard pirates, and the Yagami pirates are in a 3-way confrontation situation. The Navy is in the best position to wait for work, but it is impossible to completely destroy the Yagami pirates and the Whitebeard pirates. If the Yagami pirates and the Whitebeard pirates join forces, they can defeat the Navy. But there is no doubt that joining forces is simply impossible. Red hair. Marco stood on a raised ice rock and looked in the direction of Shanks. Shiryu of the Rain slowly lowered the blade. Everyone slowly put down the movements in their hands. In this completely melee situation, the appearance of red hair is enough to change the whole situation of the battle. Once it joins the battlefield, it will inevitably evolve into the largest battle since the era of the Great Pirates. Moreover, in this case, the situation of the Yagami pirates and the Whitebeard pirates will be very bad, because the state of the cadres on both sides is already on the verge of the limit. Philo reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, recommend and share. Chapter 246, Give Me a Face. Step. 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 Shanks, wearing clogs, stepped on the ice, and walked slowly towards the field. He did not release the domineering arrogance of the Overlord, and to release the Overlord in this situation would be tantamount to provoking the three forces at the same time, and a bloody battle was inevitable. Aokiji stood not far away, with a dignified and vigilant look in his eyes, looked at Shanks, and said, "What are you doing?" Although it is difficult for their navy to destroy the Yagami pirates and the Whitebeard pirates at the same time, there is no doubt that they have a great advantage. But if the red-haired pirates appeared and intervened in this battlefield, the situation would be completely different. This is a situation the navy does not want to see. Shanks stopped, turned his head to look at Aokiji, then looked at Momotu, Kizaru, and Marco, Fujitora, Shiryu of Rain and others, and said, "This battle, it doesn't make any sense to continue. We'll only endlessly expand casualties, and your navy will gain nothing. What do you want to say?" Tautu looked at the red-haired Shanks warmly. Shanks' eyes stayed on Tautu for a while, and said, "I'm here. To stop this war, this battle can end here. Think before you speak, Redhead." T-Dolphin put his hands in his trouser pockets, looked at Shanks from a distance, and said slowly, "Do you want to stop the navy from dealing with pirates?" T-Dolphin's voice fell, and the atmosphere in the field suddenly became sharp. However, at this moment, the ship of the Red Hair pirates leaned against the ice. I saw the Deputy Captain Beckman, and a large number of senior officers of the red-haired pirates, set foot on the island and walked towards the field. Of the officers of the red-haired pirates instantly made the atmosphere depressing. Marco, Shiryu of the Rain and other people who fought for 3 days and 2 nights, everyone in the red-hair pirates is in full bloom. No. Shanks spoke slowly and said, "I didn't mean that, there are too many things that have to be fought because of my position. But this battle should end here. If you continue, you will only continue to lose money." Yagami Kanto looked at the red-haired Shanks with his hands behind his back. No one knew anything. In the top war in memory, it was a tough attitude that prevented the follow-up development of the war. Blackbeard doesn't want to fight Shanks in the Navy headquarters, and the Navy doesn't want to face the red-hair pirates and Blackbeard at the same time while chasing Whitebeard. But the current situation is completely different from the top war. Whether it's Whitebeard or Yagami Kangdu, it's clear that neither is in existence that will give in. A tough attitude will only make things worse, so Shanks is showing a calm and composed attitude. Shanks' words caused everyone to fall into silence. If Shanks didn't show up, Aokiji and others would definitely continue to deal with the Whitebeard pirates and the Yagami pirates. But Shanks appeared. If they continue to fight, it is hard to guarantee that Shanks will not intervene, so the situation will be extremely unfavorable. As for Whitebeard and Yagami, let alone. Except for the mysterious Yagami Kangdu, everyone else's physical strength is already on the verge of the limit, and there is no battle strength. But no one believes that Yagami Kangta can deal with so many Navy and Whitebeard forces by himself. Continue to fight, even if there are such existences as Shiryu of the Rain and Marco, it is possible to die here. Yagami Kanto looked at Shanks. Redhead. Shanks looked over. Chang. Yagami Kangdu pressed his hand toward the hilt of the sword at his waist and pulled out the blade. In the next instant, Yagami Kangdu suddenly disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already in front of Shanks. The blade in his hand slammed into Shanks with a ferocious power. Shanks' expression darkened slightly, and the moment Yagami Kangdu drew his sword, his hand was already on the hilt of the sword. And when Yagami Kangdu appeared in front of him, his sword was already in his hand, and he swung it up to meet Yagami Kangdu. Time seems to have become extremely slow. Under everyone's attention, Yagami Kangdu's blade and Shanks' blade moved closer and closer, and finally collided. Clang! Sparks fly. The terrifying wind pressure suddenly erupted, surging in all directions. At the same time, the dark clouds in the sky also opened a crack like an abyss with the collision of this sword. Iori Kangdu. Among the red-haired pirates behind Shanks, Someone's expression changed. In this unfavorable situation, does Yagami Sudo choose to continue fighting? Kaido, this beast, is still somewhat rational. No matter how crazy Yagami Kangdu is, it won't be a wild beast that is even crazier than Kaido. Kacha, kacha. The ground beneath Yagami Kangdu and Shanks' feet crumbles under the terrifying pressure of their confrontation. A large number of cobweb-like traces spread out. When everything stopped, Iori Soto and Shanks stood facing each other. Blades touched each other, except the ground under their feet was not broken. The ground with a radius of tens of meters was like ruins. Chapter 247. The curtain ends, the strongest title changes hands. Clang. Yagami Soto took back Murasama, and with a clang, he put it in the scabbard. Although he is not good at swordsmanship. But at least he has the same technology as a swordsman. This move is a test of some of Shanks' strength. Domineering top, swordsmanship. Top, even if the arm is broken, the impact is not very big. Let's go. Yagami Kangdu's gaze stayed on Shanks for a few seconds, then turned around and jumped, landed on the edge of the crater, and then stepped forward. Fujitora and the others put the blade into the scabbard. Onhelding and the others also gradually disappeared. Everyone glanced at the surrounding red-haired pirates, Whitebeard pirates, and the navy, followed in the footsteps of Yagami Kangta and walked out of the island. In the direction of Yagami Kangta's advance, the pirates of the Whitebeard pirates and the navy all swallowed their saliva and gave way, not daring to stop them. Tautu looked at Yagami Kangdu's back, and his fingers holding the blade slightly exerted force, but after all, he still didn't make a move. Everyone just watched Yagami Kangdu and his party go away. Shanks put the blade in the scabbard and let out a clang. No one noticed that where he stood with his feet, or under the soles of his feet, the ice ground was broken. But where Yagami Kanto stood before, the ground directly under the soles of his feet was not damaged. There is no doubt that even if it was Yagami Kangdu who fought for 3 days and 2 nights, he still had the upper hand in this blow. Shanks didn't turn his head, but the corner of his eye left with Yagami Kangdu. Moved to the end of the back, and then retracted. That guy. Beckman stood behind Shanks, in the center of the red-haired pirates. He took a puff of cigarette and stared at Yagami Kangdu's leaving back with deep eyes. He sensed the fact that Shanks was slightly down. Although it was only a trivial amount, it was caused by Yagami Soto defeating Whitebeard and fighting for 3 days and 2 nights. There is no doubt about it. Whitebeard is not wrong. The title of the strongest in the world, from this day on, it is indeed going to change its owner. How is it, Kuzan? Kizaru stood at the edge of the battlefield, facing Aokiji. Aokiji took a deep breath, glanced indifferently at Shanks and Whitebeard, and finally turned around and said, "Retreat." Yagami Kanto has left. Although it seemed that there was only a Whitebeard sea left, it was easier to deal with, but Shanks couldn't be indifferent. Once he starts again, the red-haired pirates are bound to join the fight. Although their combat strength this time is huge, it is impossible to fight against the red-haired pirates in a complete state at the same time as the Whitebeard pirates. One of the vice-admirals clenched their fists and was annoyed. But Aokiji and others had already left, so he could only be forced to withdraw in the end. The navy receded like a tide, and soon only the red-hair pirates and the Whitebeard pirates were left on the island. Then don't bother. Shanks saw that the navy had withdrawn, and after watching the warship leave, he looked at the direction of Whitebeard and others, and turned his head away. Marco and the others stood there, surrounded by Whitebeard. Staring at the figure of the red-haired pirates leaving, there was no movement in the end. With the departure of the red-haired pirates of Atwal, which was recorded in history, came to an end. In this war, Whitebeard stood at the top of the sea for decades. In the end, he was defeated by Yagami Kangdu and lost the title of the strongest in the world. The biggest events since the beginning of the Great Pirate Era. The Sea of 10,000 Nations. Then half a month has passed since the Battle of Atwal ended. That Fujitora, Shiryu of Rain and others suffered have almost recovered. With Gertz's healing fruit, it is not difficult to heal ordinary wounds. The result of this battle is the name of the strongest in the world. In the eyes of countless people in the world, the Yagami pirates have become an existence beyond the Whitebeard pirates. The strongest pirate force that dominates this era. On Yagami Kengdu's side, it is because of the huge loss of middle and lower level combat power that he has some headaches. In that battle, there were no casualties among the captains such as Shiryu of the Rain, but 2 of the vice captains died, and more than half of the mid and lower level combat strength were casualties. The current squad of the Yagami pirates, most of the people recruited are not affiliated pirates. Instead, they were recruited from the seas of all countries and the underground world. This loss is too great, and it is difficult to make up for it in a short period of time. This kind of middle and lower level troops has little impact on the overall combat effectiveness of the Iori pirates. But without so many people, there is no doubt that there will be a shortage of manpower to manage the huge sea area of the nations. How many people have joined these days? In the palace, Yagami Soto sat on the Shimon sofa and asked Nina. Nina walked in with a document and said, 37, there are quite a few pirates who want to join us, but you don't plan to accept them. Of course not of that kind. Yagami Kanto shook his head. That kind of pirates who only know how to burn, kill, and loot. What is he going to do to manage the waters of the 10,000 nations? As for combat power, he still lacks this combat power. Philo reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, recommend and share. Chapter 248, War Expert, Germa 66. Yagami Kengdu never planned to accept such a pirate group that burns, kills and loots. If you want to receive it, it is estimated that it is also thrown into sugar and used as a toy soldier. After all, without the prestige of the world government, it is very difficult to gather enough people in a short period of time with this method of conscription. Nina put the document on the coffee table. Has been suppressed many times because of Yagami Kengdu. But under its command, there are more than 170 member countries, more than half of the countries in the world. And no matter what happened to them, they were still pirates, and they ruled only 34 islands. 21 of these 34 islands are small islands, and there are only 4 large islands, including Cake Islands. World Government. 8 Gods Kengdu shrugged and said, if you want to have the prestige to oppose them, you must at least unify the new world first. This is a huge project. The world government currently rules more than half of the more than 170 countries, that is, more than 170 large islands, and there are only 4 under the Yagami Kengdu. And these islands are all distributed in the seas of all nations. In several directions around, either the 100 Beast Sea area under Kaido's command, the Red Hair Sea area, or the Whitebeard Sea area, the Red Earth continent, and the Navy headquarters. If you want to expand, you have to go to war with the 4 emperors or go to war with the Navy. This is a big project, and it can't be rushed. Just when Yagami Kanto was thinking, the phone bug in Nina's pocket suddenly rang. Hello. Nina took out the phone bug to answer. Helding's voice came from the other side of the phone bug. Captain Nina, Lord Yagami Soto should be by his side. Hyerding used to call Yagami Kengdu the captain, but since he occupied the waters of the 10,000 kingdoms, his name was changed to Lord Yagami Kengdu. Nina tilted her head to look at Yagami Kanto, and handed over the phone bug. What's the matter, Helding? Yagami Kengdu took the call and rushed, leaning on the soft white back of the cloud sofa and said leisurely. Hyerding heard the words, and said respectfully and solemnly, the legacy. Industry, Lord Yagami Kengdu should still have an impression. As one of the former 4 emperor pirates, the forces under his command are not only limited to all countries, but also involved in the dark underground world of the entire sea, and most of them have been taken over by the 8 Gods pirates. What's wrong? Yagami Kengdu raised his brows, sat up a little and asked. Hyerding shrugged and said, the thief stayed in a dessert factory in Beihai and was destroyed. I originally planned to go to receive it. It hasn't been long since Yagami Kengdu killed the thief, and in the middle he experienced the incident of the scientific troop base and the fight with Whitebeard, which led to the failure to fully accept the thief's former industry. East China Sea did not dabble, but the West China Sea. No one moved. As for the North Sea, after the fight with the Whitebeard pirates this time, Helding is planning to take over. The result was that the news was gone. Oh. 8God Kingdo's eyes flickered slightly, and said strangely, there are still people who dare to do this kind of thing at this time. Not to mention that he just defeated the Whitebeard pirates. Even before that, they were the 4 emperors who ruled the New World. Although the thief's legacy has not been fully taken over, those who dare to stretch their claws at such a time are really courageous. No, it's not what you think. Hierding said. The thing is this, the factory left by the thief is the Kingdom of Skoll built in the North Sea. And just a while ago, there was a rebellion in the Kingdom of Skoll. Yagami Kingdu didn't speak. He took a cup of tea and took a sip. Helding continued. This group of rebels got a lot of money out of nowhere and hired a force. The royal army of the Kingdom of Skoll was defeated, and the regime of the Kingdom of Skoll was finally overthrown, and the factory was also severely damaged in the war. What a mess. Yagami Kingdu put down the teacup and commented. Hierding said helplessly. That country is not an allied country under the world government, chaos is a normal thing. The thieves also have power over there, but after we occupied the waters of the 10,000 kingdoms, they have already fallen apart. What are you going to do? Nina asked from the side. 8God's Kingdu stroked his chin and said, the North Sea is a little far apart, even if the new regime is destroyed, it will be very troublesome to govern a country. The way, that, what is the origin of the hired forces? Hierding said with a smile on the other side of the phone, the point I want to talk about is this faction. They are a special force that has no territory but has the privilege of participating in the World Conference, Germa 66. Huh. Hearing Hierding's words, Iori Kingdu, who didn't care much, flashed a hint of surprise in his eyes. Hierding said, the factory and power left there, after the thieves were eliminated by us, they took off their banners and established themselves. The result was a war, and it was destroyed by Germa's men. Afterwards, Germa's people found out that it was the property left by the thief, and our people just happened to find it, but they were very self-aware and sincerely apologized. Chapter 249, Either Surrender or Die. Hearing Hierding's words, Yagami Kingdu's eyes flickered again, but he was not surprised. The leader of Germa 66, Sanji's father, Vince Mock Gage, is a very realistic character. Treat the weak with disdain, only focus on strength and interests. And the more such a person is, the more they know what they are doing. Finding something that shouldn't have been moved, the people from Yagami Kingdu immediately apologized and did not dare to have any tough attitude. In today's world, the most unstoppable force is the 8 Gods Pirates, and even the 100 Beasts Pirates are not as terrible as the 8 Gods Pirates today. Gage is very clear that if he offends the Yagami Kingdu, he will be destroyed in minutes. If I change to a character like Straw Hat Luffy, I'm afraid I'll just fight. The 4 emperors and the strongest pirate group would not care about the consequences at all. Since you have apologized, and you didn't know about it in advance, then let them go. Yagami Kanto said indifferently. Not long after the white beard, he is a little lazy now. Let him go to Beihai to find the trouble of Germa 66, I really don't want to move. Moreover, Germa 66 also has some strength, although it is far worse than the 4 emperors, but the backbone and bottom forces are huge. To destroy Germa 66, Fujitora or Shiryu of the Rain will lead a team. In that case, maybe Germa 66 will ask the world government for help, and cause a lot of follow-up troubles. Yagami Soto doesn't want to fight the world government and the navy again for the time being. Understood. Hierding said, but the Vinsmoric family have the intention of getting on the line with us. Oh right, the Vinsmoric family is the family that rules Germa 66. Quote. Well, I know. Eight Gods Kangdu sat there with his legs crossed and said, "But the matter of connecting the line is too naive. It would be nice not to bother them, but also want to use our flag." Germa 66 is not taken seriously in the world government because it has no fixed territory. And it is also studying clones and humans. Things, the world government may at any time remove them from the alliance countries and eliminate them. In this situation, if you can get on the line with the 8 pirates, then the ability of the fox and the tiger will be ignored. Even if the world government really removes them from their names, if you want to move them, you have to carefully consider whether they will collide with the 8 gods pirates. Then what do you mean? Helding also knew very well that Germa's thinking was too naive. They get the protection of their Iori pirates without paying any price. 8 gods Kangdu stroked his chin, thinking that there are not enough people to govern the world. If Germa 66 feet's mass-produced clones were added, it would be immediately make up for the serious vacancies in the middle and lower ranks. Tell them that if they are willing to devote themselves to our command, they can consider it. North Sea. Somewhere in the sea, several ships flying the flag of Germa 66 are sailing slowly on the sea. In a cabin in the center of its interior, here is a hall with a rather aristocratic arrangement. Are 2 sofas, a glass coffee table, and some seats in the hall. The leader of Germa 66, Vince Morkagage, is sitting in a chair. Held a steaming teacup in his hand with a cup of cat shit coffee in the teacup. What did they say? Gage asked a subordinate who was standing by the table. With a look of embarrassment on the man's face, he said, "The people of the 8 gods pirates said that if they are willing to put all their members under their command, they can consider accepting us." Tisk, what a grand style. The second son, Nicholas, who was sitting beside the table, let out a sigh. The eldest son Ig took a sip of tea and said calmly, "After all, it's the 8 gods pirates, but even Whitebeard defeated it half a month ago. But this style is a little too much, it makes us look like homeless, ha 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 ha." The 4 sons Yuji leaned back in the chair and laughed. The only woman, Raju, sat there without speaking. A finger rested on his lips, showing a thoughtful look. After a while, she said, "After all, we destroyed the property they were going to receive without our knowledge." Raju's words softened Gage's expression a little. Although the 8 gods pirates are powerful, the attitude expressed in such words is a bit too much. Understandable if you think of the fact that they destroyed the industry that the other party was going to receive before. You should be lucky if people didn't come to beat you, and hope that the other party can talk to you in a good way. That's just nonsense. Are all staff involved? A thoughtful look appeared on Gaji's face. It is not an unacceptable thing for all members to be under the command of the 8 gods pirates. Acceptable. Strongest force in the world today, other than the world government. And they Germa 66, although they have always wanted to dominate the North Sea, but they have many difficulties. Even facing the crisis of being delisted and eliminated by the world government. Philo reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, recommend and share. Chapter 250. Vince Morkagage who knows the current affairs. Although the North Sea is a much weaker sea area than the Great Sea Route and even the New World in the second half, it is not so easy to dominate here. After all, on the Great Route, there are many pirates who have gone out from the North Sea, and many places are the hometown of some powerful beings. But the situation is not optimistic. On the one hand, to put all the members into the Iori pirates, which means to bow down to Iori Kingta. This point, Gage is still a little reluctant to accept. After all, he is also a hegemonist. What he wants most is to cooperate with the 8 gods pirates. According to the information he has obtained, although the captains of the 8 gods pirates are very strong, their troops are seriously insufficient. This is also a normal thing. After all, the 8 gods pirates do not accept the participation of pirates, and the speed of their rise has only been a few years, and the background cannot be compared with the other 4 emperors. In this case, their Germa 66 can just provide the middle and lower ranks of troops to make up for the shortage of the Eight Gods pirates. But the problem is, even if the Eight Gods pirates don't want them, there is no big problem. Nothing more than slow development, and governance in a short period of time may be a little troublesome. In contrast, what they have to face is the risk of being delisted by the world government, and they may be eaten by the world government. How can we reach a cooperative relationship? Gage kept thinking in his mind. With the help of the power of the Eight Gods pirates to dominate the North Sea, and at the same time they provide the Eight Gods pirates with enough middle and lower level strength, this kind of cooperation is undoubtedly the most perfect. A month has passed. During this month, Germa 66 has been in constant contact with the forces under the Yagami pirates. Assist Helding to receive the North Sea's industry, and provide information to the Yagami pirates. After a lot of efforts, the relationship between the two parties finally eased completely and reached the stage of preliminary cooperation. However, that alone is not enough. Even, because of their contact with the Yagami pirates, the world government's attitude towards Germa became even more indifferent after learning a little about the situation. In this unfavorable situation, Gage made certain decisions. That is to go to the waters of the world and go further with the pirates. This request was approved by Yagami Soto. So after another half a month, at the beginning of the 19th year of the Great Pirate Era, the ship of Germa 66 came to the waters of the world. The coast of Cake Island. 66, Vince Morkagage, took his 3 sons and 4 of Reiju to the Cake Island. Is this the center of the thief once? Gage glanced at Cake Island. According to his information, it should have been the base camp of thieves before. Although it has been repaired and rebuilt after the war, it can still be seen that it has experienced a tragic war for people like Gaji who often get involved in the war. Is it there? Gage took a few steps and looked at the huge factory in the center of Cake Island, showing a hint of inquiry. The construction of this thing is also a little too unsightly, and it doesn't look like the place where Yagami Soto lives. The person next to Gage is Helding. He shook his head and smiled. No, it's not there, it's up there. Helding pointed to the top of his head. Gage, Niji and the others looked up and saw that the sky was blue and white clouds fluttered, but they couldn't see anything. At a strange time, a group of people came over. There was also a pile of strange objects in his hand, like a pile of strange shells. Captain Halding. Group of people came to Jaji and others, ignored Jaji, and saluted Hireding respectfully. Hireding said, "Okay, send us up." Yes. The group of people responded immediately. Start fiddling with what's in your hand. Soon a large cloud of white clouds came out, and more than 10 strange shells were placed under the white clouds. Helding turned his head to look at Gage and the others, and said with a smile, "This is our special means of transportation, and it will take us there." Oh. Gage stared at the strange white cloud a few more times, and then walked up with Niji, Reiju and the others. Helding followed suit and said, "Stand still." PFF'd, PFF'd, PFF'd. Just as Helding's voice fell, the shells under the white cloud suddenly made a thumping sound. A strong air flow was ejected, pushing the whole group of white clouds to rise rapidly into the sky. Oh. Unexpectedly, this thing can actually take people flying. Niji and others all showed a bit of surprise. It's very interesting. Reiju stood on the edge of the white cloud seat, looking at the gradually rising scenery. He rested his chin in one hand, showing a look of admiration. Although their memory metal armor and equipment can easily fly into the sky, they have never been to a height of more than 1,000 meters. Chapter 251. The world's strongest active-duty strongest, Yagami Kangdu. The air will be a little thin, please be careful. Seeing that the flying was getting higher and higher, Hireding smiled and reminded Jaji and the others. Gage nodded and looked up at the sky. Now it seems that the base camp of the Eight Gods pirates should be above the sky. This is indeed an unexpected thing, although it is somewhat miraculous, but it is also in line with the identity of the strongest 4 emperors. Soon, the white cloud seat came to an altitude of 8,000 meters, and could vaguely see the huge white cloud floating at 10,000 meters. The legendary Sky Island. It really exists. Gage and the others looked at the huge white cloud and opened their mouths. They have heard the word Sky Island more or less, but they have never been there, so they are not sure whether it really exists. And now it seems that Sky Island is not just a legend. The view is beautiful. Leiju looked at Sky Island Bika, who was gradually showing her style, and couldn't help but exclaimed with a hint of envy, "But I really wanted to live here for a while." The white cloud seat continued to float up, and finally came to a landing point on the edge of Bika. Helding led a few people up. "Go this way." I didn't give Gage and the others much observation time. Helding waved at Gage and the others, and led them to board Pika. Along the way, I encountered some winged Sky Islanders, all of them respectfully saluted Helding. On Bika Island, the position of the captains such as Helding is second only to Yagami Kanto. As for the vice captains of each division, most of them have never been to the Sky Island, or are not qualified to set foot on the Sky Island. Even the vice captain is forbidden to set foot here without the permission of Lord Yagami Kanto. Don't make a loud noise. Hyerding led the crowd to the magnificent white cloud palace in the center of Pika, and explained to the crowd. This sentence carries a bit of a serious reminder, which makes Jaji a little awe-inspiring, and his demeanor also becomes solemn. As for Niji and others, because they are special transformed people, there is no human character such as fear, and there is no change in their expressions. Enter the palace. Young girl from the sky with a delicate face, golden eyes and blue eyes approached her. Smiled at a few people, motioned them to come in, and let her lead the way. Oh, an angel. When Niji and the others saw the face of the empty girl, they were amazed by her appearance, showing exaggerated expressions one by one. There was a hint of helplessness in Leijo's brows. Be restrained, the 3 of you. Gage reprimanded with a sullen face. His sons are perfect warriors in every way, except for one thing, their lustful nature. In this respect, it was carved almost in the same mold as Sanji. Yes. Naturally, Niji and others obeyed Gaji's orders completely. This is what they have been enacted since they were born, and they must not go against Jaja's orders, and protect Jaj as the first principle under any circumstances. Said to be a son, in fact, he has never been treated as a family member by Gaji, and for Gaji, he is equivalent to a cultivator of cronies. Under the guidance of the girl on the empty island, several people went deep into the White Cloud Palace, and after passing through a delicate and magnificent pavilion, they came to a palace inside. Well, someone's here. Yagami Kanto stood by the window on the side of the palace with his hands on his back. Looking at the scenery on the empty island from a distance, I noticed the arrival of Gage and others. He turned his head and glanced at everyone calmly. This look is not sharp, it seems unusually calm, but a domineering arrogance is suddenly aroused, and it is brazenly coercing towards Jaji and others. Wherever this tyrannical arrogance went, there were faint cracks on the ground of the White Cloud Palace. However, because the palace was built by Shimayan, it has strong toughness. After the crack appears, it recovers quickly, like a water flow. Under the oppression of Yagami Kanto's domineering arrogance, Jaji's complexion changed, only to feel that his breathing suddenly became heavy, and the whole person seemed to be carrying a heavy giant peak. At the same time, the expressions of Niji Yuji and the others also changed. Although he didn't stumble back because of this, there was a cold sweat on his forehead. Overlord, domineering. 3 drops of sweat appeared on Gage's forehead, and he murmured in his heart, once again having a new definition of Yagami Kanto's horror. Without any action, just being a tyrannical domineering, it is already terrifying to such an extent that it almost makes them lose their combat effectiveness. This is the strongest man in the world. Yagami Kanto. This tyrannical domineering pressure did not last. How long? After just a few seconds, he disappeared silently and was taken back by Yagami Kangdu. At this time, Gage and the others were already in a cold sweat. Especially Reiju, she is a very special existence. Between Sanji and Niji and others, he possesses human feelings, but also possesses a special physique and powerful strength. It is precisely because she has the feelings of a normal person, so when facing Yagami Kangdu's domineering arrogance, she was affected more strongly than Niji and others, and her clothes were partially soaked with sweat. Phailu reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, recommend and share. Chapter 252, Dismount the Horse, Terror Overlord. That man. Leiju looked at the figure of Yagami Kangdu and took a deep breath. He didn't show any fear because of this, instead he showed a gentle smile after Yagami Kangdu's arrogance was withdrawn. I like that kind of arrogance. Sit down. Yagami Kangdu walked over from the window and motioned for Gaji and the others to find a place to sit down. Jaji paused for a while, and said, Your Excellency, Yagami's boldness is indeed extraordinary. It is very abrupt to take the liberty to come to disturb you. No need to care. The copyright of the novel resource belongs to the original author. The text is only for personal study and trial reading. Please delete it within 24 hours after downloading. Please support subscribing to Genuine Novels and refuse piracy. This novel was first published by Dragon. Feilu's novel Internal Group 1,142,529,731. More wonderful Feilu novels are in the hands of the group owner. Welcome to the group. Yagami Kangdu casually came to the main seat and sat down. As a dignified emperor, he naturally has to carry it a little. The redhead went to Whitebeard's place to show the domineering look first. He felt that this method was very good, and a domineering look was enough. Because Niji and the others are transformed people, they don't have any fear of Yagami Soto. Even if the overlord before Yagami Kangdu gave them heavy pressure. But the lack of fear does not mean that there are no other feelings. Still felt solemn about the existence of Yagami Kangdu, and no one made any presumptuous actions for a while. Quietly, the girl from the Sky Island who had guided Gage and others before appeared. He came to the palace with a tea tray, and put a few cups of freshly brewed tea on the table, which is unique to Sky Island. Seeing this, Gage's expression softened a little, and the tension in his heart subsided a little. The title of the strongest in the world, as well as the status of the 4 emperors, coupled with the domineering arrogance of the overlord just now, he was still very stressed. But when this cup of tea was served, it showed that Yagami Kangdu's attitude was not so indifferent. Does the tea unique to Sky Island taste very good? Leiju took a sip of tea and smiled at Yashin Kangdu, as if the things that had been affected by the overlord color before did not exist. That's right. Yagami Kangdu nodded and gave Leiju a light look. The specialty of the island, it is difficult for ordinary people to drink it. To be said that Leiju's elegant demeanor and unrestrained character and behavior made him a little favored. At least, it's much better than those in Iguich. Leiju smiled, then cherished this opportunity to drink. 8-God Kangdu took a sip of tea and said, It's not something rare. If you stay here, you can drink it every day. Leiju smiled sweetly and said, Is this okay? Sitting by the side drinking tea, but he had a credit for Reiju in his heart. He was still thinking about how to get closer to Yagami Kangdu, but he didn't expect Reiju to do it so easily. This kind of situation is naturally what he is happy to see, and it is far better than having a head-to-head conversation with Yagami Kanto. Yagami Kangdu smiled lightly, and just as he was about to say something, a voice suddenly came from behind. The eldest daughter of the Vinsmoke family, Vinsmoke Leiju. If I remember correctly, your ability seems to be poisonous. It is indeed a very good ability to deal with the enemy. Nina walked over with a smile. Yagami Aoto paused for a moment while holding the teacup. He didn't have to look back to perceive Nina's expression at the moment. Her eyes were curved into crescent moons, and there was a pretty smile on her face. Is this Captain Nina? Leiju smiled and said, It seems that you have a very thorough understanding of our intelligence. It is an honor to be so taken seriously. After all, the management is the intelligence unit. Of course, you have to learn more about the people who come to visit. It's your job. Nina tilted her head and smiled. Her eyes were still in the shape of a cute crescent moon. She came to sit next to Yagami Kangdu. Yagami Kanto sighed. Ignoring Nina and Reiju, he looked at Jage and said, "This time, you are going to talk about the so-called cooperation." Gage, who was pondering how to come up with ideas, was relieved that Yagami Soto took the initiative to shift the topic to the main topic. He also ignored Nina, who was smiling and looked at Reiju, and Reiju, who was smiling at Nina, and said to Yagami Kang, "Exactly. Since Captain Nina knows us so well, I think you know something about us, Captain Yagami." Iori Kangdu said casually, "I have heard some. I used to be a member of the Science Corps and worked with Vegapunk. Later, they parted ways due to some things, but the bloodline factor and cloning technology were still researched." Gaji said, spread out his right hand, motioned Yagami Kanto to look at Niji, Reiju and others on his right, and said, "These are my children, and they are also the perfect works of science and technology that I have obtained. All are the best warriors. With the equipment of science and technology, it can wield extremely strong combat effectiveness. In addition to them, I can also produce clone soldiers in batches who have normal physique, are not afraid of death, and absolutely obey orders. This is also a force that countless countries in the North Sea fear." Speaking of this, Gage's tone revealed a faint pride. Chapter 253. Submission, the ambition to dominate the North Sea. Although the power he masters cannot be compared with the top powers in the New World, it can be said that he can deal with ordinary countries with ease. He can defeat even the normal forces of the New World. In the past, he assisted the royal army of a certain country in the New World to destroy the rebellion provoked by the Revolutionary Army. It was very nice. Yagami Kangdu commented indifferently, "But you are also being targeted by the world government, and the world government probably wants this kind of thing." Compared with Gage, the resources held by the world government are undoubtedly unmatched by any other force. Once Gaji's technology is obtained, clone soldiers can be produced in large quantities, and even the existence of Ignij can be mass-produced. Ordinary clone soldiers are not bad, Igniji and others are not weak. If it were produced in large quantities, it would undoubtedly be an extremely formidable corps. That's exactly what I wanted to say. Gage's tone became a little depressed, and said, "The world government wants what I have researched in my life, but they won't let me rule the North Sea, so I won't give it all to them." Gage has no ambition to rule the world, his highest goal is to rule the North Sea and make Germa stand at the peak of the North Sea. If the world government agrees with Gage to rule the North Sea, then he is willing to hand over his bloodline factor technology and cloning technology. But the world government will not allow any force to dominate the North Sea. This is absolutely not recognized by the 5 old stars. So this transaction can never be established. If you want to dominate the North Sea, you must either rely on your own strength, or you must rely on other forces. It is obviously difficult to reach the sky by himself, and the contact with the 8 gods pirates has made Jaji see a possibility. If he can get the support of Yagami Kangdu, the support of Yagami pirates, and with cloning technology, he is expected to rule the North Sea. So you plan to trade with me? 8 gods Kangdu took a sip of tea and said lightly, "You want to use my power to deter all forces, make the world government fearful, and use the resources of the 8 gods pirates to dominate the North Sea." Was defeated by Yagami Kangdu, but Jaji was not embarrassed, because all of this was already clear in itself. He solemnly said, "This is indeed my idea, but at the same time, my power will also be handed over to you. With clone troopers and scientific power, you can have an army that absolutely obeys orders and is not afraid of death. Whether it is to govern the seas of all nations, to expand, or to conquer other countries, they can be used." Gage still hopes to gain a more independent position. He doesn't mind being attached to the Yagami pirates. But what he wanted was to play a role similar to that of a feudal lord. Sounds good. Iori Kingdu said indifferently, but your strength is not necessary for me, this is an unequal transaction. And, you guys, people are here. If I destroy you here, I can also take over your power. Yagami Kanto spoke in a calm tone with extremely threatening words. Gage's expression darkened, and he said, if we die here, the clone troopers under my command will kill themselves after destroying all data technology. Then put you all in custody. I am interested in the transformation method of the bloodline factor, and I can just use you for research. Yagami Kingdu said lightly. Why? Leiju suddenly opened her mouth. She looked at Kingdu Yashin, and said softly, we will give you everything you need, and all we need is your protection. Really, send it with both hands. Iori Kingdu chuckled and said, what if I wanted you? Cough. Nina coughed. Yagami Kanto pretended not to hear. Leiju didn't resist in any way. Instead, she smiled softly and said, I can't be the master. It depends on whether your father agrees. Jaji looked at Yagami Kingdu strangely, his thoughts flashed quickly in his heart, and said, Captain Yagami Kingdu, are you not married yet? He suddenly thought that in the rumors, it seemed that there was indeed no mention of Yagami Kingdu having any confidants. Because the 4 emperors and the strongest in the world, the name is too dazzling, covering up the fact that Yagami Kingdu is extremely young. At this moment, Gage suddenly felt that it seemed that he could start from this point. If Reiju could. Oh, what do you want to say? Yagami Kingdu turned his head, looking at Gaji with a half-smile. Does this guy still want to be his own old man so whimsical? Gage's eyes touched Iori Kingdu's expression. He choked for a moment, and then he thought of the identity of Iori Kingdu. After a little struggle in his heart, Gage still said cruelly, if Captain Yagami Kingdu is willing, I think Reiju is willing to serve by your side. The perfect work of the bloodline factor is only Reiju and IG, Niji and Yuji 4. If you hand over one, there will only be 3s left, which can be said to be a little heartache. But if this can be exchanged for Yagami Kingdu's support for Germa, so that he can dominate the Beihai, then it is completely acceptable. Philo reminds you. 3 things to read, collect, recommend, and share. Chapter 254. The Bargaining Chip, Leiju's Sorrow. No one noticed, when Gage said those words, Reiju let out a soft breath. There was still a smile on her face, but no matter how you looked at this smile, there was a hint of sadness. She was not surprised that Gage made such a decision. At this time, I suddenly thought of Sanji, and I don't know how Sanji is doing now. Is she still alive? She has very little affection for the Vinsmoke family. 3 brothers with no human feelings, a so-called father who only values strength and interests. Okay. Yagami Kingdu was just talking casually, but he didn't expect Reiju and Gaji to come along so easily. Since it has become like this, then it will be fine. He originally planned to bring Germa 66 into his sphere of influence, otherwise he wouldn't let Gage and others set foot on the empty island. Nina glanced at Yagami Kanto, but didn't say anything. As the understanding of Yagami Kingdu is concerned, I am afraid that no one can pass her. When Yagami Kingdu is just purely whatever comes to his mind. Doesn't think about the consequences in advance at all, she's already a little used to it. Just. Why do you still want to give Yagami Kanto a finger gun? Well. This is really good news for Germa. Seeing Yagami Kingdu agreeing, Gage showed a slight smile, although his attitude was a little unsavory. An existence like Yagami Kingdu, a dignified 4 emperors, and an extremely domineering style of conduct, of course he will not go back on what he promised. From today, Germa 66 will be listed as the 7th division. Iori Kingdu said casually, you are the captain, you can decide the other adjutants and the like, the specific management is up to you. Yagami Kingdu also does not intend to intervene in the management of Germa 66, nor does he intend to put his own people in the middle of a large group of transformed people like Germa 66. As long as you can command the movement, you can dispatch it at any time, that's all. Even if Yagami Kangdu is a thrower, training and commanding troops will be left to Jaji. That couldn't be better. Naturally, Gage had no intentions of this and wanted to raise his hands in approval. After Yagami Kangdu finished speaking, he turned his head to look at Leiju, and said, "Then Leiju will stay here as a liaison between you Germa and us, and she can report anything to her. In addition, the clone troops on the side of the world are also led by her." Now that she has decided to keep Leiju, Iori Soto will naturally not arrange an idle job, and it would be better for her to be the middleman between the Iori pirates and Germa 66. Germa 66 will definitely stay in the North Sea for a long time, and there will only be a few clone troops left on the side of the world. The clone troop here is led by Leiju, who is responsible for the governance of the waters of the world. Her character also makes Yagami Aoto feel more at ease. Someone like Shiryu of the Rain is really not suitable for governing a country, and going out to fight and kill is. Okay. No problem. Gage nodded, and he was happy to see such a situation. The clone troop left in the 10,000 Kingdoms is led by Leiju, and can also directly talk to Yagami Kanto. Even if this position is not as good as the many captains of the Yagami pirates, they are much closer than those vice captains. In this way, he doesn't have to worry about staying in the Beihai for a long time, and the situation that any rumors from Wanguo's side will be detrimental to him. Yagami Soto ignored Gage, but looked at Leiju, waiting for her answer. Gage noticed this, turned to look at Leiju, and said, "Leiju, what do you think?" Of course, asking is tantamount to asking in vain. Leiju cannot disobey his orders. This sentence just reminds Leiju to answer. "I'm fine." Leiju responded calmly and said, "It's my honor to be the liaison officer and the leader here." Yagami Kangdu glanced at Leiju. Although she didn't reveal anything on the surface, Yagami Kangdu could still sense the change in her heart. Part of the perception of emotions after seeing and hearing domineering to the extreme. Yagami Kangdu doesn't know if this is the legendary voice of all things. But even if it is, I am afraid it is only a very elementary stage, because he cannot interpret history based on his knowledge and domineering. Most. A little capture of other people's inner emotions, such as anger, sadness, pain, etc. Then I will leave you alone. Yagami Kanto said to Gage and the others, "Just go to Fujitora to discuss the resources you need. To have a clone troop that is enough to satisfy me appear in the nations within half a month. You can rest assured about this." Gage smiled and said, "Science can't go wrong. As long as there are enough resources, such a perfect army can be produced at will." Spoke, he bid farewell to Yagami Kangdu observantly, and at the same time gave Leiju an order. This order, naturally, let her stay with Yagami Kangdu. While obeying Yagami Kangdu, observe the situation here and report to him at any time. Without waiting for Leiju to respond, Gage left the palace with the three of them. Chapter 255. Bloodline Gene, the third son Sanji. Leiju sat there, holding a teacup and sipping the tea lightly. It seemed that she didn't receive the order given to her by Gage, or she didn't really want to pay attention to it. Nina looked at Leiju and shook her head slightly. She is a little sympathetic to Leiju. After all, she has all the information on Germa herself. Of Leiju and the others, as well as Gage's personality, the current Leiju is being traded as an item. Anyone who encounters this situation will not be very happy. Yagami Kangdu looked at Leiju with drooping brows, walked beside her very naturally, and whispered in her ear. "Want to know about Sanji?" Leiju's eyes narrowed, and she suddenly raised her head to look at Kangdu, the eight gods. Iori Kangdu stood up straight, smiled lightly at her, and said, "Come with me, I'll tell you." After the voice fell, Yagami Kangdu stepped forward without looking back to see Leiju's movements. Leiju's face was stunned, suspicious and so on. A look flashed. The end, he followed in the footsteps of Yagami Kangdu and left the palace with Yagami Kangdu. Sanji, the third child who died. A look of surprise flashed in Nina's eyes. With a domineering look, she could naturally hear what Yagami Kingdu said to Leiju, and Yagami Kingdu didn't deliberately hide it from her. In the large amount of information she collected about Germa, the name Sanji only appeared in a few words. The third son of the Vinsmoke family died early in the war. Normal people may ignore this sentence, but because her memory is too strong, she recalls it in an instant. Listen to Yagami Kingdu's tone. It seems that Sanji didn't die, and there was another secret in her heart. The surprise in Nina's eyes was even more, and she was very curious about where Yagami Aoto got the news. It's been like this since a long time ago, and Yagami Soto always knows a lot of things inexplicably. Now she is in charge of the intelligence unit of the entire Yagami pirates. All information must be passed through her hands, and she is also the only source of information for Yagami Kingdu. The information she didn't know, how did Yagami Kingta know? The more contact with Yagami Kingta, and the deeper she knew Yagami Kingta, the more Nina felt that Yagami Kingta had other things hidden from her. But if Yagami Kingdu didn't say it, she wouldn't, at best, guess it by herself. It's her responsibility to do her job well. Sky Island Bika Central. At the top of this towering white cloud hall, the figure of Yagami Kingdu walked up from the revolving corridor. Come to the highest point, overlooking the entire Sky Island and clouds. Reiju's figure followed behind Yagami Kanto, and slowly climbed to the top of the palace. So, Sanji is still alive. That Yagami Kingdu revealed to her. A trace of tenderness flashed in her eyes. Although, no news of Sanji has been found for a long time. But she had always had a hunch that Sanji might still be alive, but now it has been verified. As for whether Yagami Kingdu was lying to her, she didn't think about it at all. First, the identity of Yagami Kingdu is placed there, and secondly, because Yagami Kingdu can know the name of Sanji, it shows that Yagami Kingdu really knows a lot of things. Although, she doesn't know how Yagami Kanto understands this. Well, I'm still alive. If nothing else happens, you can meet again in the future. 8 Gods Kingdu stood with his hands behind his back, looking at the scenery of the clouds from a distance. If nothing else, Sanji will join the Straw Hat Pirates. Then the Straw Hat Pirates will venture into the Great Route, participate in the Top War, and reach the New World. But unfortunately, Luffy's dream may not be realized, because Yagami Kingta will not allow One Piece to appear in this world. He is the 4 emperors, and to become One Piece means to surpass him, which is obviously impossible. After he overthrew the world government and pacified the world, he would not allow the appearance of One Piece. Unless, before he overthrew the world government, Luffy was able to run to Ralph Drew while he didn't care to find the so-called, "Can we meet again?" Leiju's eyes twinkled and muttered, the words of Yagami Kingdu had given her enough reverie. Yagami Kingdu looked at the clouds in the distance, at the golden brilliance of the sun, crossing the edge of the white clouds. Then he retracted his gaze and looked at Leiju. He looked at Leiju and thought for a while, and suddenly felt a little curious about Leiju, and released a domineering and careful perception. Bloodline factor. This is another scientific product like a black technology. Reiju sensed Yagami Kingdu's gaze and Yagami Kingdu's perception, and turned her head to look at Yagami Kingdu. Avoiding it, he tilted his head with a smile and said, "What are you looking for, Lord Yagami Kingdu?" "I'm a little curious what the so-called lineage factor is." Yagami Kingdu didn't hide it. He opened his mouth with one hand on his chin. Leiju shook her head and said, "I don't know this very well. Father has never told us anything in detail. As for the core technology of the bloodline factor, Jaji is naturally firmly in his own hands. Even Leiju and the others didn't reveal it in detail, or it would be meaningless to say so. He doesn't need to train Reiju and the others into scientists, he just needs to obey orders and become powerful warriors." Philo reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, recommend and share. Chapter 256. The Attitude of the World Government. Is it? Yagami Kanto rubbed his chin, not doubting what Reiju said. At Leiju for 2 more glances, he waved at Leiju, motioning for Leiju to come over. Leiju walked over without resisting, with a gentle smile on her face, letting Yagami Kingdu look at it. Yagami Kanto's probing hand pressed on Reiju's shoulder, and his fingers touched her. A little force, you can feel the hardness of the bones in the body, which is completely different from ordinary people. Lineage factor modification. This is not so-called mechanized transformation, but something similar to genetic modification, which is a fundamental enhancement. Leiju frowned slightly, feeling a little pain, but didn't avoid it. Yagami Kingdu didn't exert any more force. He let go of his hand thoughtfully, and swiped his fingers on Leiju's face again, and finally put it in front of him to observe carefully. Poison. Yagami Kingdu raised his brows slightly and asked Leiju. Reiju's ability is poison, and he is very clear about that. Leiju shrugged and said innocently, instinctive reaction, if you're not careful. Need me to detoxify you, do you? No need. Yagami Kingdu shook his head. With his immortal body, if such a little poison could still cause harm to him, it would be a big joke. You must know that his current physique is much stronger than the beast Kaido. Not to mention Leiju, even if it was Magellan's poison, I'm afraid it can only make him numb. Should I say, as expected of the fourth emperor? Leiju looked at Yagami Kanto's fingers, her eyes flickering slightly. She could naturally see that her poison had no effect on Yagami Kingdu at all. Although this poison was not inspired by her full strength, it was just an instinctive reaction. But Iori Kingdu can ignore this toxin, so even if she fully activates her abilities, I'm afraid it won't have any effect on Iori Kingdu. Your physique is interesting. Yagami Kingdu gave Leiju a faint smile. As for Leiju's physique, he is generally a little bit better. However, there is no way to use this external method to know the more details. Yours too. Reiju smiled. Yagami Kingdu rubbed his chin and thought for a while, and said, though something like bloodline factor can make you have superhuman strength from birth, it also curbs your potential. It's a pity. Reiju looked at Yagami Kanto in confusion. Iori Kingdu explained calmly, everyone's potential can be said to be similar. Who are naturally strong or only born with a large part of their potential. The Navy's Garp and the Pirates' Whitebeard are all real powerhouses who have developed their potential to the limit. And the way you use the bloodline factor, although you are born with power, the potential that belongs to people has also been curbed, and it will become more difficult to develop. To reach human limits like Cap Whitebeard. Leiju said thoughtfully, so it is. This bloodline factor is sacrificing the future to shape the present. Although it is almost impossible for ordinary people to fully develop the potential of the body. But after they have been transformed by the bloodline factor, it is even more difficult. The way forward has been fixed, and the limit of strength has been finalized. She can feel that since the age of 16, she has not improved her strength for a long time. Won't be discouraged. Yagami Kingdu looked at Leiju and asked with a slight smile. Reiju smiled and said, there are very few people in the world like the hero Garp and Whitebeard. If there is no bloodline factor transformation, maybe now I will be a little stronger than ordinary people. Not everyone has something to be the strongest idea in the world. Many people have never had this idea. Then it is even more impossible to become the strongest. After all, even himself has already denied himself. It's hard to say. Yagami Kanto shook his head. If Leiju hadn't been transformed by the bloodline factor, it might be similar to the current Sanji's strength, and the current Sanji is still there, a chef at a sea restaurant. But this is also uncertain, maybe she can continue to break the physical limit. All the way forward by leaps and bounds, with stronger strength than now. S current strength is inferior to that of Helding, Nina and others. There is not much difference between the vice-captains of the various squads, and it is between them. World Government. Holy Land Mary Joa. Germa and Iori are in contact. That. Wensmerk Gage, are you planning to join the Four Emperors? Wu Laoxing and others received information that Germa 66 was in contact with the Yagami pirates, and their expressions showed a chill. Regarding the science and technology mastered by Jiaji, their attitude is not as eager to get it as Jiaji thinks, but a dispensable attitude. Because Vegapunk can completely study the things of Gage, and what Vegapunk is studying now is much stronger than Gage's technology. Chapter 257. On the right track, news of the soul fruit. The mechanical transformation man named Pacifist is extremely powerful, and it is only the first generation. Vegapunk is now working on the second generation, and even plans to add the laser power of the Kayabong to it. In the face of pacifists, Gage's human cloning technology is just like that. But although the 5 old stars have a dispensable attitude towards Jiaji's technology, they don't want to see others get this technology. Especially the Iori pirates. In today's ocean, it is the Iori pirates that pose the greatest threat to them. The current Iori pirates do not yet have the ability to confront the government head-on. It is already extremely difficult for them to destroy the Yagami pirates. And unlike the other 4 emperors, the governance of the 8 gods pirates by the 10,000 kingdoms makes the hearts of Wu Laoxing and others gloomy. Of governance is completely different from other pirates. In the eyes of ordinary people, it is nothing, but in the eyes of Wu Laoxing, it shows the ambition of Yagami Kangdu. Yagami Kangdu is not reconciled to being a pirate, he wants to establish a real world that belongs to him. That technology can't let Yagami get it. We can't seem to stop it. Several 5 old stars were discussing, and their faces were not very good looking. Although human cloning technology is nothing, but if it is obtained by the 8 gods pirates, it cannot be called a tiger's wings, and it can finally sharpen a few sharp fangs. Try it, let someone stop Germa. Going to the Sea of 10,000 Kingdoms to deal with Germa is obviously whimsical. But if Germa leaves the waters of the world, you can try it. Half a month passed quickly. During this half month, Germa 66 was attacked by the Navy. However, with Helding and Ujixi staying, the attacking troops of the Navy were routed. At this time, the world government also announced that Germa 66 colluded with the pirates and removed him from the allied countries under the world government. To this, Gage was not surprised, and was prepared. Of the world government that Germa was completely labeled as the 8 gods pirates. Long for Germa to be listed as the next 7th division, and the news of the scientific force spread all over the world. Germa did not fall into a situation where everyone shouted and beat him because he was removed from the world government. On the contrary, no one dared to provoke him for a while. You must know that the Yagami pirates defeated the Whitebeard pirates not long ago. Became the strongest in the world, Yagami pirates also became the most terrifying force among pirates. Many people are not afraid of the world government because they are in collusion with officials within the government. As long as they didn't do anything, the world government would ignore the world government's rulers, the 5 old stars, and petty crimes. But pirate forces are different. They don't care about 3721. Once you provoke them, maybe someone from the other party will call at the door the next day. Just like that, half a month has passed in a hurry. A group of clone troops appeared in the waters of the world, led by Leiju. Responsible for the governance of 33 medium-sized islands and 666 small islands in the waters of the world. Coupled with the expansion of the 7th divisions during this period of time, there is finally no shortage of manpower. Sky Island Bika. Inside the palace. Transfer the fruit, gave it to Bazuo. Yagami Kanto was sitting there peeling fruit, listening to Nina's report and said casually. Bazuo is one of the giants, and can be regarded as one of the elites. In the previous battle with the Whitebeard pirates, the performance was also very good. Of course, it is still far from Rhodes and others, but it is much better than other giants. And Bazuo followed Yagami Kangdu earlier than the vice captains and members of each division. In terms of military exploits, there are merits in battle, and in terms of qualifications, there are qualifications, and the fruits of transfer ultimately fall into his hands, but no one has any objection. Yes, there is one more cadre of the giant core. Nina nodded. She also understands the power of transferring the fruit, and Bazuo who ate this fruit suddenly had a huge increase in strength. Due to the particularity of the transfer fruit, his power is close to the situation where the stronger is stronger, the only thing lacking is two-color domineering. However, in the process of practicing hard, after a year and a half, he will not be much worse than Rhodes and the others in terms of domineering. Is there still no news of Soul fruit? Yagami Kanto threw the special fruit of Sky Island into his mouth and asked Nina. Nina shook her head. By the way, recently there was a new pirate who refused the invitation from the world government's Shichibukai. Oh. Yagami Kingdu hadn't paid attention to Kibukai's affairs for a long time, but Nina still occasionally reported to him. At the level of Chiwahai, he could still catch his eye. Especially Hokage, the world's largest swordsman, whose strength is still unclear. Phailu reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, recommend and share. Chapter 258, Fire Fist. Ace. The point is, this rookie pirate is a natural ability person. The giant soldier pirates are built with the natural system, which is the plan made by Yagami Kanto a long time ago. Therefore, if someone with the ability of the nature department appears, she will also report to Yagami Kingdu. This incident happened to be involved with both the nature department and Chiwahai, so there is no reason to not notify Yagami Kingdu. Nina took out a bounty and placed it on the coffee table in front of Yagami Kingdu, saying, this newcomer has already offered a bounty of 400 million Baileys, and is known as Fire Fist Ace. Oh, it's him. When Yagami Kingdu heard about the natural ability person, he already had some guesses. Today is the 19th year of the Great Pirate Era, and it was this year that Ace went to sea, and quickly passed the first half, becoming a super rookie of that generation. He even refused the invitation of Kibukai and stepped into the new world all the way. In the end, he tasted the fruit of failure at Whitebeard, no longer wanted to be the pirate king by himself, and turned to Whitebeard's command. Where is he now? Yagami Kingdu looked at the familiar face on the reward order and asked casually. Nina said, I went to Fishman Island, but I didn't cause trouble on Fishman Island. I should be able to go to the new world soon. Is that so? Iori Kingdu thought for a while, and said, pay attention to it a little. Now that the thief has been eliminated by himself, there may be some changes in the course of Fire Fist Ace. Just a rookie, Ace, naturally not worthy of Yagami Kingdu's attention in terms of strength alone. But his identity is unusual. He is the son of Roger, the Pirate King, and the grandson of Carp, the Navy King. He can even involve the red-haired Rayleigh and others. Understood. Nina nodded. New World. Somewhere near the sea surface of the Red Earth continent. Seawater suddenly surged, and a huge bubble emerged from the water, wrapping a ship inside. As the hull fully floated to the surface, the bubble also burst with a click. Oh, it's finally out. On the deck of the ship, a young man in a fur hat stretched vigorously. He stretched out a finger to support the crooked leather cap, and a ray of flame overflowed from his finger, and his identity was self-evident. Ability to burn the fruit, Fire Fist Eye, the body is fire, how can I feel uncomfortable in water? Boss Ace, the crew we went to Ace next came over, experienced the sea breeze of the new world, and asked Ace. Ace looked at the sea in the distance, his eyes flickered with a deep smile, and said, I want to find the red hair first, and then... 2 months later. About 12,000 kilometers in the sky. Yagami Kingdu is fishing, and the bait is abundant, so that his 3-color domineering level has been raised to the full level, but he has not yet awakened, so it is slightly inferior to the top. At this moment, the phone bug beside Yagami Kingdu rang. What's the matter? Yagami Kingdu asked in a deep voice. Fire Fist Ace has entered the world. Nina's very brief words came from the other side of the phone bug. Yagami Kangdo's expression paused for 2 seconds, rubbed his neck, made a clicking sound, and hung up the phone bug. Then, he turned his direction, headed down, raised his foot and stomped, and the air was sonic boomed by him again. The whole person rushed to the Sky Island Bika at a very fast speed. Whoosh! Like a falling meteor, the distance of 2,000 meters will come in an instant. At the moment when he was about to land, Yagami Kangdo easily changed his direction and lifted his foot to relieve his force. Finally, it fell into the huge courtyard paved by the island cloud, and the island cloud at the foot fell into the calm lake like a drop of water, causing ripples. Go through the courtyard to the palace. Nina was already waiting here, with a clean suit in her hand. Did you get into a fight with our people? Yagami Kanto asked Nina. Nina tilted her head and said, well, it seems that she is planning to challenge you. Fire Fist's strength is not weak, ordinary people are not his opponents, Hireding has passed. Yagami Kangdo heard Nina's report and said calmly, Helding may not be able to win him. You may not win, and you may not lose. Nina took the black cloak, went behind Yagami Kangdo and put it on Yagami Kangdo, and said, Shiryu of the Rain is planning to go there. Shiryu is fine. 8-God Kangdo shook his head and said, I'll go there myself, I don't need him anymore. Okay. Nina answered neatly, picked up the phone and notified Shiryu of the Rain. Shiryu of the Rain, who had just finished wiping the sword, heard that Yagami Kangdo was going to go over in person, so he couldn't help but shook his head and put the sword down again. Finally, someone who could chop down a few times came, but Yagami Kangdo was going to steal the head. But no way. Who made Yagami Kanto the boss? All nations. Somewhere on a medium-sized island, formerly Biscuit Town. On the streets of the town, a figure bathed in flames was confronting Helding. Chapter 259. Newborn Calf, Terrifying Strength. Boss Ace, that guy is the captain of the Yagami Pirates. Leader of Giants, Helding. Behind Ace, his crew gave Ace a solemn reminder. Captain. Ace's hat was burning with flames, and a confident smile appeared on his face, saying, before dealing with your boss, I will use you to practice your skills. It's a good thing for young people to have confidence, but at any rate, they have to count on their own strengths. Hireding was not angry, but showed a smile and said, there are many people who challenge our captain, but a large part of them can't even see our captain's face. The 8 Gods Pirates have been the 4 emperors for a while, and occasionally there will be supernovas who conquered the first half of the season and come to challenge them with high spirits. Most of the newcomers couldn't even pass the level of the vice captain. Sometimes they can't even see their captain, let alone challenge Yagami Kangdo. Because Ace's reputation as the most powerful supernova in recent years, and he is an unquestionable generation of powerful newcomers, all other pirates in the same period will be crushed by Ace. Coupled with the ability of the natural devil fruit, Helding would choose to come over in person instead of leaving it to the vice captains to deal with it. Is it? Ace smiled and said, but there will always be someone who can break all this. Fire Fist. The moment the voice fell, Ace's eyes flashed. The flames of the right fist erupted and swung towards Helding. A fiery flame swept across the entire street in an instant, and bombarded Helding in a mighty manner. As expected of the ability of the nature department. Helding narrowed his eyes slightly, jumped decisively, and came to the top of a roof, avoiding Ace's frontal blow. At the same time, a terrifying aura erupted all over his body, and he began to cover with sad blue steam, and at the same time a shock wave erupted. Boom! The wind pressure swept out, and a huge tiger head appeared out of thin air in midair. The day tiger roared out and charged towards Ace. As a natural ability user, Ace is invincible in the first half, and often ignores other people's attacks directly. But in the new world, he has long been in touch with the power of domineering. It is very clear that the people in the new world are completely different from the opponents in the first half. Whoosh! Ace did not hesitate and chose to dodge decisively. However, Helding's angle was tricky, and it still rubbed Ace's shoulder, rubbing his clothes. If it was the first half of the Great Route, Ace would be surprised to encounter such a situation, but in the New World, it is not surprising. His face sank slightly, and his fingers took the position of a pistol. Musket. Bang 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 bang. The fingers instantly turned into flames, like a pistol, shooting flames towards Helding. Helding's cloak trembled, his fists clenched, and he waved the shock wave again and again. Boom boom boom. After the continuous explosions, the flames that Ace erupted were all annihilated. Is it domineering? Attack was easily resisted. Ace's eyes flickered slightly, as he had expected, a slight arc appeared at the corner of his mouth. Like Luffy and the others, he is a rough-hearted person. But in the battle process, I don't know if it's talent or what, but I can often grasp a lot of details. Blast. With Ace's voice, a slightly different flame suddenly erupted as it passed by Helding. The flames instantly turned into raging flames. Helding's expression changed slightly, he jumped decisively, and avoided the distance. He tore off his lit cloak in an instant and threw it on the street below. I can sense my attack, so I'm careless. Ace snorted, and with a wave of his arms, two flames suddenly swept away. Helding frowned slightly, and chose to retreat under Ace's power. His attack method is relatively simple. Ace's fire can cause damage to him, and he can only choose to fight Ace in close quarters. But Ace obviously knows this, and has been paying attention to the distance between himself and Helding. Although Hyrding could completely break out the 8-door Dungia formation to crush Ace, but this is not a battle of life and death, and it is not necessary at all. But without opening the 8 armors, he could not get close to Ace, so he had to choose close combat. Long-range battles, the natural ability such as Burning Fruit can undoubtedly gain the upper hand. Amazing. Many of Ace's crew members who were watching not far away watched the captain show his mighty power, and their eyes showed an excited look. The 4 Emperor pirates don't seem to be anything special. Yeah, the captain, who made countless people feel terrified, is also hiding in embarrassment in front of Boss Ace. Since I had seen the redhead with Ace before, and had held a banquet with the members of the red-haired pirates, everyone had almost no fear of the 4 emperors. Now watching Ace show his mighty power, forcing Helding to keep dodging, all of them smiled. Philo reminds you, 3 things to read, collect, recommend and share. Chapter 260, The Strongest Man Has Appeared. However, Helding, who kept dodging Ace's attack, looked very calm. He just didn't want to go shopping with Ace. It wasn't that he was powerless to resist, nor was he under pressure. Whoosh. Seizing a chance, Helding bullied Ace next to him. Fist was swung out, and the fist instantly attached to the armed color and domineering, and it was dark and hardened. Ace was not timid, and a fire fist swung up against Helding. Boom! Blazing flames exploded in the field. Helding quickly retreated back in the flames, not wanting to be burned to his clothes by the flames. Ace maintained his fist-pushing posture, the flames churning violently in the sky. After his low drink, the flames in the sky continued to sweep towards Helding. Armament and domineering are also divided into strengths and weaknesses. Helding's armed color is not strong, he is better at seeing and hearing. 4. A person with natural devil fruit ability, and it's still burning the fruit, it's a bit dwarfed. Is it only a matter of physical exertion? Helding avoided the flames swept by Ace and continued to climb back and forth, shaking his head slightly in his heart. Since his armed attack was against Ace's fire fist, he was weaker in attack, so he could only rely on his arrogance to look for opportunities, or use up his physical strength. However, the physical stamina of the natural devil fruit abilities is abnormal. In other words, they use abilities, and the consumption of physical strength is very low, far lower than those of superhuman abilities. However, after Ace forced Helding to retreat, he did not continue to attack, but instead looked at Helding from a distance. Why, don't you plan to make a move? He raised his head, with flames still burning on his arms, and said, if you think you can't win against me, you should call out your boss as soon as possible. Herding heard this, his face became sinking, showing a heart-pounding expression. It doesn't matter what other words are, no matter how mad he can act like a child. But when asked to ask Yagami Kingdu to come out, he couldn't pretend that he didn't hear it. Deal with Fire Fist, and called Yagami Kingdu to make a joke. This is taking him for something. I can't pretend I didn't hear what I just said. Helding's face showed a face, not hideous, but unusually positive. However, just when he was about to start, he noticed something and turned his head to look at the sky behind him. I saw a black shadow coming from the distant sky at a very fast speed. Like a meteor, it fell to the island. At the same time, Ace also noticed the appearance of the shadow, and also looked up at the sky. A strange color flashed in his eyes. What is that? The many crew members behind him also looked at the sky subconsciously and saw the falling shadow. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. The shadow is getting closer and closer, and it is about to reach the sky above the town. The strange disappearance seems to be their illusion. Illusion. Ace watched the black shadow disappear from his sight extremely abruptly, and couldn't help frowning. Many other crew members also showed inexplicable expressions. You look at me, I look at you, and I think I have an illusion. But when they strangely retracted their gazes and looked in Helding's direction again, their gazes all stopped. Only see. Beside Helding, a figure appeared at an unknown time. I didn't notice it at all. Ace looked at the figure, and there was a dignified alertness in his eyes. He didn't notice how the shadow appeared at all, when everyone's breathing stopped slightly and their expressions changed. I saw Hyrding restrained his angry expression before, and bowed respectfully to the person who came. Master Yagami Kingdu. I didn't expect you to come here in person. Yagami Kingdu, you don't need too many words, just this word will make all Ace's crew take a breath. The world's strongest man, the captain of the Yagami pirates. Yagami Kingdu. Although they have all seen Yagami Kingdu's bounty, no one would have thought that this. The person who is called the most dangerous existence in the world, the body does not seem to be any different from that of an ordinary person. This can't help but remind them of redheads. When they were having a banquet with the red-haired crew, they were all suspecting that this guy was really the 4 emperors of the New World. He was wearing clogs and pants, his beard was shaggy, his shirt was unbuttoned. And he had no image at all. If you compare it with the red hair, it seems that it is still the appearance of Yagami Kingdu, a little bit more domineering. Are you, Yagami Kingta? Looking at the figure of Yagami Kingdu, Ace spoke with a smile on his face. Since he went to sea, he has never encountered a defeat along the way. The first half of the Great Route was almost swept across. The world government tried to use Chiwahai's position to recruit him, but he was rejected directly, and he didn't care at all. After visiting the redhead, he has only one goal. Win the strongest man in this sea. And now, he finally came to the front of Yagami Kingdu, or in other words Yagami Kingdu appeared in front of him.